There are moments that define you. Moments when you realize the people you love most see you not as a person, but as a resource to be exploited. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, excelled at creating such moments. This one started innocently enough, or so it seemed, with an announcement of a family trip. A much-needed getaway, she said, for her and my son, Robert, and their 2 children. Lovely, I thought. They work hard. What came next, however, felt less like a request and more like a directive, delivered with the casual certainty of someone stating the sky is blue. They were leaving Buster, their excitable, large golden retriever, with me. Just for 2 weeks. My quiet home, my carefully cultivated routine, my personal space, all were apparently considered free, on-demand boarding for their pet while they jetted off. It wasn't just about the dog. It was about the sheer, breathtaking entitlement, the absolute lack of consultation or even a polite ask. It was the assumption that my life was so empty, my time so worthless, that I would, of course, be thrilled to become their unpaid dog sitter because they wanted a vacation. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe family should protect, not exploit each other. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. I had always been there for my family. After my husband, Thomas, passed away 5 years prior, I found solace in maintaining the life we had built together and offering support to Robert and his family whenever they needed it. They were my world, the connection to the future Thomas and I had dreamed of. I helped with school fees when things were tight, offered my home for holidays and birthdays, and babysat the grandchildren whenever asked, often without needing to be asked twice. I wasn't immensely wealthy, but Thomas had been a careful planner, and I managed our finances prudently. I owned my home outright, a comfortable house on a quiet street filled with memories. Robert and Sarah had their own house, but they often spoke of financial pressures, the rising cost of living, the expenses of raising children. I sympathized. I genuinely did. I believed family supported each other, that we were a safety net woven from love and shared history. I had sacrificed my own leisure, my own quiet retirement hobbies, sometimes even my own needs, to be available for them. My friends gently suggested I set more boundaries, that I was perhaps too generous, but I brushed it off. They were my family. They needed me. Or so I believed. Sarah was a force. She was ambitious, driven, and possessed a remarkable talent for presenting her needs as universal truths and her plans as unavoidable realities. Robert, bless him, often seemed to orbit her, agreeing to whatever she proposed with a quiet nod. He was a good son in many ways, but passive when it came to Sarah's more demanding tendencies. Over the years, the requests for help had become more frequent, the assumptions grander. My car was borrowed without asking permission first, just a quick text saying, "Took your car, need it for errands," my pantry raided because they hadn't had time to shop. My presence expected at events with little notice, requiring me to drop whatever I was doing. It was a slow erosion of boundaries, subtle at first, easily excused as the casualness of family, but building into a pattern of genuine disregard. I remember overhearing Sarah on the phone once, about a year prior, complaining to someone, a friend, perhaps, about how old people have it so easy with their paid-off houses and pensions, implying that it was only fair they share the wealth. Robert had shushed her, looking uncomfortable, but the sentiment lingered, a sour note in the harmony of my perceived family life. That had been my first real jolt, a flicker of unease that I quickly extinguished, telling myself I had misunderstood. The trip announcement came over Sunday brunch at my house. The grandchildren, Liam and Chloe, were excited, bouncing in their seats as Sarah described beaches and swimming pools. Robert smiled, looking pleased. Then, as I was clearing the plates, Sarah turned to me, her expression one of pleasant expectation. "Oh, Mom," she said, using the casual endearment she employed when she wanted something, "we're leaving Buster here, of course. It'll be too complicated to board him, and honestly, Kennels are just so sad, aren't they? He loves it here with you. She didn't ask if it was okay. She stated it as a fact, a minor detail tacked onto the end of their exciting news. Buster, a bundle of furry energy, was already sniffing around my kitchen, tail wagging. He was a sweet dog, truly, but he was a handful. He needed long walks, specific feeding times, medication for a skin allergy, and constant attention to keep him from chewing the furniture. Leaving him here for 2 weeks was not a small favor. It was a significant imposition. My mind reeled. I had plans, small ones perhaps, a book club meeting, a visit to a friend in the next town, a quiet week tending my garden, none of which involved round-the-clock dog care. My immediate reaction was a wave of shock and hurt. They hadn't even thought to ask. They had simply decided. The casualness of it, the utter certainty that I would just fall in line, was what stung the most. I managed a weak smile. "Oh," I said, the only word I could muster. Buster Sarah didn't seem to notice my hesitation. "Yes, the kids are so relieved. They know you'll take good care of him. We'll drop him off the morning we leave." She moved on to discussing flights, the topic of Buster apparently closed. I stood by the sink, clutching a damp dishcloth, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just about the dog. It was about the invisible leash they seemed to think they had on me, pulling me in whatever direction was convenient for them. That small step I took was internal, a hardening, a realization that this wasn't just casual family reliance anymore. This was exploitation. The next few days, the manipulation escalated subtly but relentlessly. Sarah sent me texts with lists of Buster's needs, specific food brands, his medication dosage and schedule, notes on his favorite toys. She didn't ask if I needed anything or if I was prepared. She just sent instructions, treating me like a hired hand. Robert called, ostensibly to chat, but casually mentioned how much Buster loved staying at my house, reinforcing Sarah's narrative. There was no discussion of compensation, not even an offer to pay for the extra food or any potential damage. My quiet attempts to gently probe, asking about the exact dates again, mentioning I might have something planned, were smoothly deflected or ignored. "Oh, don't worry about dates, Mom. We'll confirm soon," Sarah texted, or, "I'm sure whatever you had planned can wait. Buster needs you." It became clear this wasn't a favor being asked. It was a duty being assigned. I started documenting everything. I saved Sarah's texts, forwarded relevant emails to a separate folder, and kept a small notebook where I jotted down dates and times of conversations, noting who said what and the implied assumptions. It felt strange, almost conspiratorial, but a deep-seated instinct told me I needed a record. I decided I needed objective advice, someone who wasn't emotionally invested. I called Eleanor Vance, a lawyer I knew vaguely through a community group, specializing in estate planning and family law. I presented the situation hypothetically at first. If someone left a pet at a relative's house without clear agreement, what are the relative's rights? Eleanor was calm and professional. She explained that unless there was a prior written or explicit verbal agreement to pet sit for a specific duration for compensation, I was under no legal obligation to care for the dog or even allow it onto my property. It was considered abandoning property. The pressure intensified as the departure date neared. Sarah called, her voice tight with false gratitude. "We're just so grateful you can do this for us, Mom. It means the world. We've told the kids you're looking after Buster, and they're so happy. You're a lifesaver." It was a preemptive guilt trip, locking me into the role she had assigned me, making it sound like I had eagerly volunteered. Later that week, I overheard Sarah talking to Robert on the phone while they were at my house for dinner. They were in the kitchen, just out of my sight in the living room. I heard Sarah say, "Honestly, it's perfect. Mom loves having Buster. She loves having a purpose, really. It's not like she has anything else going on. And it saves us a fortune on boarding fees." Robert murmured something I couldn't quite catch, but Sarah's reply was clear, sharp. "Don't be ridiculous, Robert. She wants to do this. She'd be lonely otherwise. And besides, her voice dropped slightly, but I still heard her. It keeps her busy, keeps her happy, keeps things accessible. The implication hung in the air, thick and ugly. Keeps things accessible, my home, my time, my potential future inheritance. Were these the things she meant? It wasn't just about the dog. It was about maintaining easy access to my resources, financial and otherwise. This was antagonist micro cameo too, raw and ugly, and it shattered any remaining illusion I had about their motives. My resolve hardened into something cold and brittle. I would not be kept busy or happy for their convenience or access. I would take action, measured and strategic. My preparations began quietly. I didn't confront them. Confrontation would lead to arguments, gaslighting, attempts to manipulate me back into compliance. I needed to work silently, methodologically, using the knowledge I had gained. First, I tidied up my finances. I moved some funds into accounts that were less easily accessed. I reviewed the beneficiaries on my accounts and updated my will, ensuring everything was exactly as I wanted it, removing any ambiguity. I made sure all my important documents, house deeds, financial statements, power of attorney papers, which I had revoked shortly, not dog sitters, but trips. Trips to places I had always dreamed of visiting, but had put off because family needs always seemed to come first. Places far away, requiring long flights and serious planning. I needed a destination that would make my unavailability absolute and unmistakable. The Maldives entered my search history. White sand, turquoise water, total escape. It felt daring, almost rebellious, and the thought of it sparked a thrill I hadn't felt in years. This research, this planning for myself, was my strategic preparation, my quiet act of self-preservation. The idea of them arriving back expecting to pick up Buster and finding an empty house and a note felt increasingly satisfying. The smoking gun wasn't a single document, but the cumulative weight of their actions and words, culminating in Sarah's final, dismissive confirmation. 2 days before their departure, she texted, "Just confirming we'll drop Buster off around 8 a.m. Friday. Bags are packed." So excited. No question, no request, just the statement of intent. It was the definitive proof that this was a non-negotiable imposition, not a favor. It was the legal weapon, their own communication, proving they intended to abandon the dog at my property without my explicit, willing consent. At that moment, sitting in my quiet living room, looking at that text, I felt a wave of cold calm. I had all the information I needed. My legal consultation had confirmed my rights. My financial affairs were in order. My bags were also packed. Not for Buster, but for me. I went online and booked the Maldives trip. I chose a resort that was remote, beautiful, and required multiple flights to reach. I arranged for a taxi to pick me up early Friday morning, an hour before Sarah planned to drop Buster off. I canceled my local plans, the book club, the friend's visit, with brief apologies, citing unexpected travel. I didn't elaborate. The counter-strategy was in motion. They were leaving for their trip, utterly convinced I would be here, dutifully looking after their dog. Their overconfidence was absolute. They had won in their minds. But they had only won the battle they thought they were fighting. They had no idea I was fighting an entirely different war. Friday morning arrived, quiet and cool. I woke before dawn, showered, and dressed carefully. I double-checked my passport, tickets, and travel money. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Sarah had so casually announced her plans for my life. I felt no anger, only a deep sense of purpose and a strange, exhilarating freedom. I wrote a short, clear note. I chose my words deliberately. "Dear Robert and Sarah," it began. "You informed me you would be leaving Buster with me today. As we did not agree on terms for this, and I was not asked if I was available or willing to provide care, I have made other arrangements. I will be out of the country for the next 2 weeks. You will need to make immediate arrangements for Buster's care upon your return. I wish you a pleasant trip." I placed the note prominently on the kitchen counter, where they couldn't miss it if they somehow managed to get inside. I checked the locks on all the doors and windows one last time. I secured the deadbolt. My taxi arrived precisely at 7 a.m. I took my suitcase, locked the front door behind me, and walked down the path, leaving my quiet house, soon to be their problem, behind me. I imagined the scene upon their return. Tired from their long flight, probably dusty and rumpled, anticipating the happy reunion with Buster and the easy transfer of responsibility. Walking up to my front door, perhaps expecting me to open it even before they knocked. Finding it locked. Ringing the bell. Knocking louder. Realizing something was wrong. Maybe they had a key? I had changed the locks months ago after a previous incident involving unannounced visits and borrowed items, a quiet boundary they likely hadn't even noticed, because they hadn't tried to enter without me present since. Their dawning confusion, then frustration, then panic. The neighbors might see them, looking perplexed on the porch. Then, somehow, getting the note. Reading it. The shock, the realization. They had assumed, they had demanded, and I had simply disappeared, leaving them with the consequences of their own presumption. The frantic calls and texts would follow, of course. I had already set my phone to airplane mode. I would check messages later, when I was ready. The truth would unravel quickly. They'd have to explain why they needed emergency pet care. To their friends, to Robert's colleagues, maybe even to the kids, though I doubted they'd be entirely honest there. The story would come out. They left the dog without asking, and I left the country. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, no shouting match or tearful accusations. It was simply a consequence, delivered with quiet precision. My strategic victory wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my autonomy. It was about showing them that my life, my home, and my time were mine to control, not theirs to exploit. While they were scrambling to find an emergency kennel, paying exorbitant last-minute fees, perhaps facing questions from concerned onlookers, I was stepping onto a seaplane, the turquoise expanse of the Maldivian Sea stretching out before me. My house remained quiet, empty, a silent testament to boundaries finally enforced. The immediate aftermath, from my perspective, was pure bliss. The Maldives lived up to every expectation. The quiet, the beauty, the absolute detachment from the everyday stresses of home and family drama was exactly what I needed. I allowed myself to relax fully, knowing my home was secure and my affairs in order. I eventually turned my phone back on, days later, to a flood of increasingly desperate and angry messages from Robert and Sarah. There were accusations of cruelty, selfishness, and abandonment, all the things they had been guilty of. There were demands that I return immediately or arrange for Buster's care from overseas. There were attempts at guilt, mentioning how upset the children were, though I suspected that was more about their own inconvenience. I read them all with a detached calm. They had faced the consequences, finding last-minute emergency boarding, paying heavily for it, and dealing with the sheer inconvenience and embarrassment. Robert eventually sent a grudging message admitting they had managed to get Buster into a kennel. My new boundaries were clear and firm. Upon my return, I didn't immediately resume contact. I took my time settling back into my peaceful home. When I finally did speak to Robert, it was brief and to the point. I explained, calmly, that I would no longer be their default solution for childcare, pet care, or financial emergencies unless explicitly discussed and agreed upon, with clear terms. My home was not a free hotel or kennel. The relationship had fundamentally changed. There was no grand reconciliation, no tearful apologies that magically fixed everything. Some things, once broken by repeated disregard and entitlement, cannot be fully repaired. But in the quiet of my own home, secure and truly my own, I found a profound sense of peace. I had protected myself, not with aggression, but with strategy and quiet resolve. The hard-won wisdom was simple. My peace was worth more than their convenience. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.